Hey, everybody, quick announcement. We're doing a second CMP study. Starting May 6th, it's a total win-win. You get to come into League if you qualify for the study, go through the first 8 weeks of League, which we call the 8-week parenting pivot. It's this incredible deep dive of implementing Connect Method parenting. And we get to follow your progress to show the impact Connect Method parenting is having on parents who implement it in their home. So it's a total win-win. All you've got to do is apply for the study before May 6th because that's when it closes, because that's when we're starting it. There's a link in the show notes. So you just click that link, answer some questions. If you pre-qualify, we'll reach out to you, confirm that it's a good fit, and then we'll be off to the races. So if you've been waiting for an opportunity to jump into League, but you've been hesitant for whatever reason, see this as your sign. It's your time to jump in. I would be so grateful because my mission is to get CMP out to more people. And part of that process is collecting statistical data showing how it works for people in their home in real situations. So it would be such a blessing for me if you feel inspired to participate in the study. And it would be such a win for you because you will be able to have access to the tools to shift from corrective to connective parenting. Now, this is only available until May 6th, so jump on it while you can. And if you're not interested in participating in the study, but you would like to start implementing Connect Method parenting, you want that assistance to guarantee you success, League is open for general traditional sign up as well. So you can sign up that way as well. You don't have to participate in the study, but both will close May 6th. So whether you are entering the traditional way or through the study, May 6th is the deadline, and we're not going to reopen until July or August for another round of League. I don't know if we're going to do another CMP study. We'll just have to wait and see. So now is the perfect time to join. And I just wanted to let everybody who's listening to the podcast know about this opportunity so that you don't go 2 more months and not have the help that you need. And real quick, before we get to the episode, I thought it'd be really fun to share some thoughts from people who just completed this study.
I just can never express how great this has been and how thankful I am. It's been everything. It's been so good.
Like, are we only 2 weeks in? It's like night and day already. There's just been this total shift.
Like our hearts are like so connected. Thank you. I'm so grateful.
I really see the change.
So fun. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So if you're ready to create a change in your parenting, you're ready to go from corrective to connective parenting, I would love for you to come participate in the study, or you can come in traditionally, but you got to get your application in before May 6th because that's when we're closing the doors. And the results, by the way, were so incredible from the first study. I am going to do a whole podcast episode about it to let you know what happens when we implement Connect Method parenting now that we have the data to support that. But we want a bigger base to pull from so that we have hundreds and hundreds of moms that have gone through this study, maybe even thousands. So if you are feeling inclined, come join us in the study. And if you have any questions, reach out to us at hello@connectmethodparenting.com and we'll get back to you. All right, on with the show. We really want to be clear that it's not our kids' job to make us feel good. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Welcome, everybody. So I thought we'd talk for a second about unconditional love and lovability. I think it's an important thing to revisit. Our brains are just trying to figure out how to be better at loving and being loved. And this is so important. What can I do to feel love? And what can I do to feel loved? Does that make sense? So if you can answer these 2 questions, you really have the secret to the universe. So let me say them again. What can I do to feel loved? And what can I do to feel love? So we're going to unpack those if that's confusing. So here's what I have come to the conclusion about love, is that love is always an option. Love is always the best option. Love feels great. Withholding love feels terrible. Love is for you, not for the other person. This is such an important reminder. Like when we're thinking about our kids and we're going through a situation where we might feel angst or frustration, reminding ourselves, if I have to choose between feeling frustrated or loving feels so much better. Learning how to choose that intentionally. So love is for you. It's a gift we give ourselves. It doesn't let the other person off the hook. It doesn't let them get away with it. It doesn't mean we're too soft as a parent. So love always has a good result. It never hurts. The lack of love, it doesn't protect. And unconditional love is a skill. And I want us to be thinking about this. Like, love is a tricky word too. So I want everyone to just think about, what is love to you? And I remember sitting in a class one time. It was a good friend of mine was there with me, and she raised her hand. We were being taught some stuff, and she goes, "So are you saying unconditional love means love without condition?" And the gal who was presenting to us was, "Yes, that's exactly what it means." And we're all like, "Oh yeah, that's what it means." But how do we actually do it? What does it actually mean? So it's a skill that we're trying to have. So bringing up this idea of what is love and how do I have unconditional love without letting them get away with it? I want you to think about what love is for you. I'm going to unpack it a little bit. It's so powerful to really think about what is love for you. And here's what it means to me. It means that you love someone no matter what. You love them when they don't meet your expectations. You love them when they come up short of basic decency. You love them when they get it completely wrong. And when we remember that contrast is part of the human experience, we stop using it as an excuse not to love someone. Love means giving grace and mercy. Yes. Love really, to me, goes back to believing that they're doing their best and assuming positive intent. Remembering that if our child was at their peak, or us, or another human, it can be another adult in our life, that if they're functioning at below what we would say is like a loving state, say they're throwing a tantrum if they're a child, or they're just being rude if they're an adult, or they're not sharing, whatever it is, we're getting ourselves to a place of, oh, all this is showing me is that their nervous system is triggered. How do I create safety so that they can feel safe again, so their nervous system comes down? And yes, we might still have to have boundaries. We might still have to have, maybe separate them from the room, from the person maybe that they're being unkind to or whatever. But to hold on to the frequency, the emotion of love and acceptance. Remember, accepting doesn't mean condoning. It's very different. I can accept their beauty and who they are. It doesn't mean that the behavior is matching who they are at that moment, like separating those two things. So I love never saying, I don't love you because, even like thinking like, oh, the resistance even can get in the way of me loving. So it's, I don't love you because is a really strong version of it, but like a less strong version of that is like, I can feel myself withholding love, have resistance to, I have some judgment around what they're doing versus, oh, I love them so much. And I need to set a boundary here. So there's never a good enough reason not to love. So practicing unconditional love lets us be ourselves unconditionally. I want us to think about that for a minute. Practicing loving unconditionally lets us love ourselves unconditionally. Let's just pause for a second and think about that, because that's so powerful. This idea of the correlation between the unconditional love we give others and the unconditional love we give ourselves. If either of those are coming up short, it's throttling the other, I promise. If we're being hard on others, we're being hard on ourselves at some level. If we want to up-level our ability or increase our ability to love or be gentle or kind or accepting of other people, we have to do that to ourselves too. They are linked together. So no matter what the problem is, we can always ask, what would love do? And love always does the best things, or the best thing. I want you to think about thoughts that create love don't come naturally necessarily. We have to practice them. We might have a certain level of them that come naturally, but there's going to be things that, because of conditioning, because of just the way the nervous system works, because of society, because of so many things, that we might have some resistance to, that will make it hard for us to just love and accept in certain situations. And that's okay. It's 100% normal. But it's also 100% possible to unconditionally learn how to love, even in those situations, but we have to practice. So words like love and deserve don't ever go in the same sentence. So we all deserve love 100% of the time, no matter what. We deserve to feel it. We deserve to know it. I call it lovability. You don't need to be anything different. Your child doesn't need to be anything different or do anything different to be loved more. Now, like I said, this doesn't mean don't let your brain go crazy and think, if that's the case, then I have no boundaries, I have no rules, I'm just being really passive. That's actually the opposite is true. The more calm we get to keep our nervous system, the more love we get to have, and the more our brain stays on, and the more we're able to show up in a really powerful way. You being loved or not loved is not about you. It's about the person who's loving or not loving you. So remember how I taught you earlier that your lovability has to do with my capacity to love you, not the other way around. This is not a judgment for us. If I'm reflecting back on something that happened yesterday and I yelled at my child, it just shows that my capacity isn't where I want it to be because I yelled at them. I don't like that. So I'm asking myself questions about, okay, not a problem, just information, right? Just information. Because I know that if I'm having trouble loving or accepting or showing up the way I want to with a child, with another human, it's just about my capacity to love. It doesn't have anything to do with the other person. And as a parent, we have the responsibility to teach and train them, our ability to respond to them. And like responsibility is our ability to respond. With our children, we have specific things that we've created a story around about how we want to instill our values and have them be hard workers. And all of that is beautiful as long as we don't end up judging them for it, for not meeting our expectations. I want you to think of the rose. How lovable is a rose, right? It depends on who loves it. Some people love roses. Some people don't love roses. The same is true for you. So if there's a person in your life that didn't love you, it was because they didn't have the capacity to love you, because your lovability is absolute. If you don't love me, that is a reflection of your ability to love me, not me, right? Are you getting it? So if you don't love a rose, I'm not going to blame the rose for not being lovable. We're not going to do that. That would be silly. And the same is true if you are loved tremendously. It's an indication of the person loving you. It's a tribute to them. We're all 100% lovable, but the ability of someone else to love us is just the reflection of their ability to love. So there's nothing we can do to become more lovable. The only thing that can change how much someone loves you is their ability, their decision, or their capacity to love you. So we can all relax, right? So we're as lovable as we'll ever be, infinitely lovable. And that's the same with our children. Do not use this against you, though. Do not use this against you. When you get through the CMP Master's course, I talk about seen and heard. I talk about responding in different ways when there's off-track behavior. All of those just become superficial tactics if we don't have the core foundation in place. The ability to show up, I often talk about this idea of coming with compassion and firmness when our kids are struggling, coming with this ability to love, having developed this skill of unconditionally loving. Even just having the awareness of what we're talking about today is going to help. I'm going to have you ask yourself some questions around it, but having that is so powerful. So you're coming with this compassion, which is a feminine energy, flowing, nurturing, and I'm going to be a little stereotypical today. So just for ease of conversation here. So that's the feminine energy we're bringing in. Some of us have that come more naturally. Some of us have to develop it a little bit more. Because when I say feminine and masculine energy, I'm not necessarily saying feminine energy all is in a female and masculine energy is all in a male. It's just this different feel of like how we show up. So this feminine energy is much more compassionate, right? But then what we have to learn how to do also is have the firmness. That's the masculine energy, the directive, the more cut and dry, more analytical, more consistent even, right? And so we have to harness and develop that skill of being firm. Or if we already have that really strong, if we tend to go a little bit more hard, then nurturing more of this compassionate energy of this unconditional love and getting into that place. So as our kids get older, we're still playing with this idea of this unconditional love and this compassion, right? And this firmness. So this is something I haven't talked about in a while. So I wanted to talk about it today, is this idea of difficult conversations. So conversations or communication is very important in relationships. As your kids start speaking, as they get older, we need to have these. And most of us have no idea how to communicate without blame, frustration, defensiveness, or justification. And this came up for me as we were coming home from our trip. This came up and we were having this conversation about how do we communicate when things don't go the way we want them to go, and have the skill set to have confrontation and come up against situations where we need to speak out or we need to say something about a situation that we don't love from a place of compassion, because we want to balance the conversations we need to have, whether it's setting a boundary, whether it's just about something we've been noticing, we're concerned about a grade, whatever it is, with our child or maybe with another adult or partner, a friend, about something we're concerned about. We want to have compassion too, especially with the kids. If we're like, they're just having this pattern of being unkind to their sibling, or they're getting bad grades, or every time bedtime's just a disaster, and we want to have a conversation. They're old enough to have that conversation. We want to know how to communicate to them from a place where our nervous system is calm and we're feeling safe. So we're not communicating with blame, frustration, defensiveness, or justification. That's a fight or flight reaction, right? So we have this primal need to be right at all costs. And this need to be right can cost us our peace. So the best way to find peace in relationships is to give up this whole idea of right or wrong. No one has to be right. No one has to be wrong. No one has to win in a difficult conversation. Most of the time when we come with that attitude, both people end up losing. So the first thing we have to agree on is that we don't need to be right about anything. We just want to have understanding. And this was a huge challenge for me. I really like to be right. I really came into this world, I think, thinking I had some really this was the right way to do things. And there's so many reasons, right? I think, can you guys relate? You just have this desire to be right. I think it's pretty common, but I had it really strong. And I remember waking up in bed one day and this just thought came to my head, and I was struggling with something. It was like, you can either be right or you can love. You really can't do both right now. And I'm not sure if that's always the case, but what I have found is that when we are so gung-ho on being like, no, this is the right way to do our homework, or the right way to have a meal, or the right way to interact with your brother, or the right way to go to bed, it's really difficult to match that rightness with the compassion and love. That rightness is very pointed, very forceful. It's just really tricky. We don't need to be right. If we believe, hey, that the path to this is understanding, wow, that just changes everything for us. Now I don't need to be right. This immediately removes the need for defense. And without defense, there's no need for offense. So now the war is over. So you could do this after the kids thought about something, after anything unplanned didn't go the way you wanted it to situation. Tell me why you were right. Tell me why you thought that was a good idea, but not from judgment, honest inquiry. How are you feeling? What were you thinking? When you drop yourself into curiosity instead of criticism, understanding instead of trying to be right, everything shifts. You put yourself in their shoes. There's no agenda other than just let me see what's happening for them. So you see it from their eyes and from their thoughts, from their steer. You get to understand where they're coming from, asking yourself, can I understand this? Does it make sense? The resistance, the judgment, it doesn't get us anywhere. So if we can just create safety in our body of it's safe for me to release the defensiveness, release the disagreement that actually doesn't serve me, doesn't get me closer to what I want to create with my children, and be in such a powerful place. And make sure you fully hear them. Make a true effort to understand what their thoughts are, what their emotions are, what their actions are, what the result they're creating. Now, I didn't suggest that they're going to be at all willing to give you the same luxury. That's not what I'm saying. It's not useful to think, I've let you talk, now you have to listen to me. When you understand how this works, you will get that telling your whole story or your side of the things or what your thoughts about it are not really even necessary. If you're new to Connect Method Parenting, I have a great way for you to get started. I created a free course that covers some of the biggest challenges parents are facing and how Connect Method Parenting solves them. In an hour, we're going to talk about why parenting is so hard, how to get your kids to want to listen to you, how to stop yelling and losing your cool, and become that calm, confident, connected parent for good. It's the fastest way to get started using connection as your go-to tool for influencing and impacting your kids. Go to cmp.works/course to get instant access today. It's not even necessary to solve the situation. Step one in having a difficult conversation or to have a conversation about something that's had some conflict is when the time is right. And I always say 24 hours after the event, you can allude to them like, hey, draw the boundary in the moment and be like, okay, we'll talk about this later when the emotions are calm. Not saying that you can't ask some of these questions in the moment. I would for sure in the moment be talking to yourself about releasing the defensiveness and disagreement, for sure, releasing the resistance. But if you're going to sit down and have a conversation and everyone's feeling safe, starting with, tell me why you're right. Tell me how you're feeling, what you're thinking, why this happened. That would be step one. Step two is just write down the facts. And you can even get to the place where you're making sure that you agree on the facts. Make sure you can agree on them. And let's say your kids are too young for this. You can actually do this just by yourself. You can just hypothesize from their perspective. Okay, What would they possibly say? And try to get into their shoes if they're not able to do this with you fully. And then write down the facts. Make sure you agree on them. If they're old enough, facts always stand alone. They're always neutral. We can agree on them because they don't really inherently mean anything and they don't make anything right or wrong. They're just facts. And then the next thing, I love this, is that you get to each write a sentence down. So to understand your difficulty or your problem, you each write a sentence. So you're making these facts mean, and they get to fill that in. And I'm making these facts mean, you fill it in. You're making it mean that your sister is mean. I'm making them mean that your nervous systems are struggling and you need some help. And this is why we disagree. We're making the facts mean something different. This is what I'm making the facts mean. This is why we're not seeing maybe eye to eye. Or now we can just understand each other better. So no one's right, no one's wrong. We have different sentences in our brains. And for an older kid, this is so powerful. We were unpacking something that happened with one of my daughter's friends. And it was like, what is she thinking? Oh, she's making that mean when you said that comment that you're upset with her, and you're making it mean she's upset with you. Oh, well, this is why we're having a hard time. It was really fascinating. And then finally, just talking in solutions, only in solutions. So each of you could find a solution, come up with some ideas, and hopefully settle on one that you could both agree on. And at this point, what I recommend is that you're not talking a lot about the problem anymore. You're just brainstorming solutions when you get to the solution stuff. So you're not like going back and talking about the incident. You're like, okay, so that happened. We both have our sentences of what we made it mean. What do we want to do the next time it happens? And the goal is to find a solution that makes life better than it was before you had the problem, and being willing to have a go at it with them and to take some time to create that with them. Here's high-level questions to recap that. So we're going to go through this process with someone on something that we're at odds with them about, or a situation where the behavior went off track. We're going to try it out. You can try this out next time. You can even write on a card. I remember I loved my 3x5 cards back in the day, just to remind yourselves of the steps and then thoughts you want to believe. So this is one of the things that you could even write out on a 3x5 card. Even though you might not do it in the moment, you could have it pulled out so that you have protocol around different things. So what is the disagreement or fight about? Or what was the event about? Why are they right? What was the situation? Another way to ask, why are they right? Why does it make total sense that this happened? And I write that down. And sometimes I'm doing this on my own. This would be a great exercise to do with someone. Or also I would do this ahead of time on my own and then do it again with them, just to get me in a good place. What was the situation about? Why are they right? Why does it make total sense to them? How is their nervous system thinking this is a really great idea? Then I like to hypothesize the steer, their steer and my steer. I'll write out like, oh, that's their steer. Super powerful. So what are the facts that we might agree on? We're talking face to face. We would actually agree on those. These are the things that happened. And then each sentence, this is what they're making it mean. This is what I'm making it mean. If you're doing it with the other person, they're actually giving you theirs and you're creating yours. I like also asking, what emotion does this cause, that sentence, for them and for me? And I might even say, what is that making me feel? You can do it that way too. And then what are the thoughts about those sentences? I was just talking about those conflicting sentences that got ahead of myself. And then brainstorming solutions about what we can do next time. And then coming up with a solution that you can both agree on. So far, we've talked about lovability and our ability to love someone else, capacity to do that. When someone's having a hard time loving us, it's about their capacity to love. Might be low or high, depending on how difficult that is for them. And then having difficult conversations. Now, I want us all to remember that relationships are thoughts. And I want us to be really clear on what we're thinking about the most important people in our lives. If you haven't done this exercise for a while, this is a great time to just get back, really getting clear. Again, we're building the foundational beliefs that everything we do in the heat of the moment is built on. We get super confused about how the world works, especially when it comes to relationships. And we are under this impression that we need to control the world, that we need to control their behavior, that we need people to behave a certain way, especially for us parents. We need to make sure things go a certain way. The sooner we can realize this, the less we try to control by force, and the more we influence with love and compassion. And just because of the relationship, right? The essence of parenting is relationships. We come into this parenting thing with this impression oftentimes that we have to control the world, other people. We have these ideas for how our kids should be or shouldn't be. We have so many rules for these relationships that we stop experiencing them because we're locked into the expectations. So we're constantly feeling frustrated or upset because the kids aren't going to bed, or they're fighting, or they're not cooperating the way we want to. We actually stop having a relationship with the essence of that child, who they really are inside. And we're having this experiences with their behavior instead. The way to turn this around is to remember that our relationships are simply the beliefs and the thoughts we have about the other person. So I could give you so many examples about people that I have like these great thoughts about. So I'll just use one of my kids. Like, I have amazing thoughts about my kids. They're not perfect, but I have amazing thoughts. Like, they're so incredible and kind and loving and thoughtful and loyal and funny and gorgeous. And then they'll come home from school and they'll be like, oh my gosh, this person said this thing to me. Who does? So this other person is experiencing my child and having a different perspective of them, a different opinion of them, different thought really about them. This would only be possible if relationships are built on thoughts, because if it wasn't, everyone would have the exact same thoughts about her. So why isn't it that everyone believes the same things about one of my kiddos? It's because our relationship with another human is dependent on our thoughts about him or her. Okay. So you want to get clear on what your thoughts are, especially the thoughts we have about our children. No judgment on the thoughts that sneak up that we're like, ooh, that's them having some judgmental thoughts about how they're treating their sibling, or how they're not cleaning their room, or how they're not coming to dinner when I call them. None of that is a problem. We just want to know what they are. So everybody think about the thoughts you have about your kids in a situation, the thoughts you're having about them, that you can feel the resistance or the frustration, because that's where you want to go clean it up. When everything's going perfect or really smoothly, the thoughts we're probably pulling up are pleasant, right? Because we have reassuring evidence out in the world. That's the truth. But as soon as things go south, those default subconscious thoughts will just pop right up. They're like, oh my gosh, here's the time to strengthen this neural pathway. So your relationship with anyone is just dependent on your thoughts about them in that moment. So if you can go back to one of those situations where you were feeling angsty or frustrated or irritated or annoyed, that will really bring out a lot of awareness for us. So what are those for you? So everyone do that right now. Think of a situation where you're like, okay, this was tricky for me. I got a little irritated. What were my thoughts in that moment? And many of you will say that your thoughts about them are dependent on what they do or how they're behaving. That's actually not the crux of it. Your thoughts about them are dependent on your expectations of them and how well they meet those expectations. So you can't have love for someone. You just have love when you think about them. So you can't be mad at someone. You can only have thoughts that make you mad. Does that make sense? We can't have hurt feelings. You simply have thoughts that hurt. And I want you to think about this visually. There's you and there's this other person. We don't have a direct experience of the other person with nothing in between us. What's in between us is all of our thinking and all of their thinking. And we barely even get to know the other person at all if we're not aware of this reality. So this work is about getting to that other person, wading through all the thoughts and expectations and trying to clean those up and eliminate them so that you can actually get to know the person you are in a relationship with. Once we understand this, our relationships will never be the same. You're going to notice as you start to do this, practice this more, that a lot of your relationships are similar because a lot of our thoughts are similar. We simply recycle thoughts from other relationships. Think about a person that you love most in the world. What's your main thought about them? And then the person who you love least in the world. What are your thoughts about them? It's so crazy. And that can fluctuate, right? But just remember, this is powerful. It allows you to step into your power. Another way to look at the thoughts we're having about our kids, another thing you could dive into is this idea of this rule book we have for them. This is like classic for parenting, right? We have this operation manual for how our children should behave. Often it's very detailed and very precise. It's a book of rules and expectations of what is normal or kind or acceptable behavior. And it's oftentimes unspoken unless the rule is broken. So it's really difficult for our kids to even comply. Or let's say we do. There was a time where I wrote up a whole bunch of rules, really in detail on my fridge. And they were looking back, so unrealistic. And I was holding them to this expectation of doing all these rules when I couldn't even comply to that many rules if I was to create them for myself. It's crazy when we do that. We're we need you to get up and make your bed and all these things. And I can't even get myself to work out. Yeah, I'm being really hard on them for that. So learning how to navigate that. And at first, just realizing I have these rules and these expectations, and they're not really serving me. And it's not that we don't have any boundaries or rules. in our life with our kids or ourselves, but it's like, why do we have them? And what are they creating? And what do we do when we mess up? Because if we're not careful, relationships can turn into just us trying to get our kids to follow the rules, or our kids, they start having rules they think we should follow as parents. And now we're just trying to get each other to follow these rules we have for each other, which is the opposite of connection. This is not what we want. So this is compliance and control at our own expense. And I think this is often perpetuated by society thinking, oh, we need to tell them what to do so that they get this result, instead of we want them to want to do these things, have the intrinsic motivation to do those things. And I'm here to guide them and to help them along the way. The focus on, is it serving me, right? Or is this real serving my kids? I love going back to serving. And when I say serving, just to make sure everyone's clear on what that means, I'm saying serving my highest good. Is this serving me to show up the way I want to with my kids? Is this thought I have, or this rule or expectation I have, not helping me show up the way I want to with my kids? So especially with the parent-child relationship, we really want to be clear that it's not our kids' job to make us feel good. It's not our kids' job to make us feel satisfied or happy or content or good about ourselves. That's not our kids' job. And oftentimes, if we're honest, that's what we're wanting. Like, we want them to behave because that helps us feel good. And we're not doing this consciously, guys. It's just a subconscious thing of us being in a place where we're a heat-seeking missile for a certain emotion. And an easy way for our body to get it is if our kids behave a certain way. So we're trying to control and have these expectations, even manipulate a little bit of their behavior, instead of saying, it's my job to feel content and happy and to feel peace, or to feel whatever the emotion that we are seeking out, and regardless of their behavior. Then that allows us to increase our capacity to have unconditional love when we're really onto ourselves about that. So we want to take care of our own needs and just enjoy the journey of parenting, even if and as we are navigating tricky things. It makes things so much better. Yes, it makes things so much better when we take the self-responsibility to take care of ourselves. I remember when I started to realize this, I was a hot mess. It was like, if the house is clean and the kids do their chores and everybody's kind to each other, then I can feel good. And if not, then I feel terrible. When I switched it around, I'm like, oh no, I get to feel good no matter what. I showed up so much better to the kids now that 10 years ago, when I was really getting the hang of this, it was like, oh, and when I showed up so much better, everything changed. They showed up a different way because my mood was different. My emotions were different. You could say my energy was different, and their nervous system responded differently. So just knowing we have these manuals or operating procedures and realizing how much powerful it is to just drop the ones that are not serving us can do so much for us. This is tricky because your brain might resist this, but I'm just going to offer it to you guys to think about, is it serving you? Is it actually creating more help? Are they helping more by you holding on to this belief of they should help more, or they should work harder, or they should do their homework when they're asked, or they should come to the table when I call them? Is that actually serving you? And is that actually getting you that result? A lot of times it's not. It's actually getting us the opposite, because then they're disappointing us and we have this expectation that's unmet, and it just spirals. And then we're frustrated. So then we have this resistance, and then we're trying to control them. And then they feel this oppressive control coming out of us, like vibrating out of us. And so then they're like, no, don't tell me what to do. And they push back even more. This is what I encourage you guys to do. Just write them down. What are all the things I think my kids should be doing? Which ones feel terrible? Which ones are never happening? You don't have to drop your desire to have that happen, but dropping the angst and the control you have around it not happening will change everything. So when you drop your expectations, it allows you to create a healthy boundary instead of having a graspy expectation. And you get to decide what you think and feel regardless of how they are acting. All right, guys, thanks for going on that journey where we talked about lovability, where we talked about how to have these difficult conversations when things don't go the way we want them, when we're talking about dropping our expectations. It was so good to just revisit these topics that sometimes go unnoticed. So if something that we talked about today pinged something for you, use that as a focus for this week. Bye, guys. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.